What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I'm going to be talking about the SPY, the Nasdaq, the QQQs, and the indices, break down what the charts are telling us, what you should be watching for going forward, and also what the data is telling us about earnings coming out for tomorrow. Now, before I break anything down about this, though, before I give you guys any price predictions, I do have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner. Make sure you take none of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire community as a whole. And the last thing is, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link down below and in the description. Now, I know this offer was supposed to end yesterday, but it has been extended for another 6 days. And the way it works is if you sign up with my link down below and deposit any amount of money into the account, whether it's $1 or $100, it's up to you. You are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks, each worth up to $3,000, and any of them can be a free Tesla share. The offer has been extended once again. It ends in just 6 days. Check it out before they run out to get your 12 free stocks, and they're not going to extend it after that, so make sure you guys are ready. But anyways, in my video from yesterday, I mentioned that the market's likely going to see a bounce. I did talk about this likely happening. That's very similar to what ended up happening to SPY, because when you look at the 5-minute charts, we came down to retest we came very close to retesting this trend line of support, at least during some parts of today. But before that happened, right, SPY gapped up off the bank earnings that came out, and they weren't too great. They weren't too bad either, kind of in the middle. And then after that, we saw some weakness as SPY came down to fill the gap. So it went from 416 almost. We almost reached 416. Then we came all the way down to the 412s. So it had a bit of a drop today. And then we bounced off the 412s, and this thing started to slowly uptrend over and over again. And this thing actually closed in the 414s, a little bit in the green. So we had a green day overall, right? Very interesting stuff. So the question is, how are we going to open tomorrow? That's going to depend heavily on earnings. But I just want to note that we're starting to show lots of signs of chop right now. And could we pop more? I mean, it is technically possible since there's no true indication of the market reversing just yet, unless we get a clean break below this trend line right here. If we break down to like the 411s, become very, very cautious, be very, very careful, because in that case, that would be a bearish signal. But for now, we're holding up. So it's going to depend heavily on earnings. But I will give you guys what I believe is likely going to happen later on in the video. Now, looking at the data, the VIX is very undervalued. We're at the lowest level we've seen since the very beginning of 2022. The VIX is very undervalued right now. The put to call ratio for the overall market is actually an extreme greed right now. Even though that's different for SPY specifically, right now a lot of people are just, they're becoming greedier, they're becoming very excited, they're buying, they think that we're in a bull market, and so on and so forth. Looking at the McCullen volume summation index, this basically shows even more greed in the market. This is actually just continuing to see buying and buying and buying, and this is very interesting. Finally, when you look at the price strength, it's greedy. Momentum is extremely greedy, and the overall fear and greed index is greedy as well. So people are just continuing to buy in and buy in. And as we get closer to extreme levels or even reach them, that's where you have to become very, very concerned. There's no guarantee we even meet extreme levels right now, right? So we have to be very cautious there. For earnings, we have ASML, we have Morgan Stanley, Tesla, IBM, we have Ally Bank, Nasdaq, Discover. Lots of big earnings for Wednesday. It's going to be the biggest earnings day of the week, in my opinion. The big dogs reporting earnings are going to be Tesla and IBM and also Morgan Stanley. This is going to be super, super impactful, super important for the markets. And I think one of the biggest of them all is Tesla. Will Tesla keep rallying? If it does keep rallying thanks to earnings, this could actually help SPY and QQQ. But if Tesla fails on us and it ends up actually tanking after earnings, it's not going to be pretty. SPY and QQQ could actually slow down, and that's why we have to be very careful. Now, when it comes to the overall charts, I just want to note that we don't have too many puts expiring for SPY specifically going forward, at least for tomorrow. It's actually very low. So I don't expect us to be too crazy. We might see a lot of choppy price action, and we could even cool off a bit, saying that the put to call ratio is a little low. But then for Friday, it's at around 3.4 million puts expiring. And if I were to short, I'm going to try to bring the markets down to max pain levels in the low 400s to try to hurt as many shorts as possible. I'm sorry, to hurt as many people as possible, right? To hurt a lot of the people going long, and they want to actually go against the market makers in this case to get as many puts in the money, right? Sorry about that, guys. But anyways, for the VIX, I just want to note that it's very undervalued, and this will actually affect perception going forward. Netflix has reported earnings, all right? And some sectors were actually better than expected, others were not too great. Their overall growth was not what Wall Street wanted, but they did actually beat on earnings per share. Revenue did meet expectations, so overall pretty mixed for Netflix. And this is actually leading to some positive sentiment and expectations now for earnings because a lot of these companies are doing better than what we expected. Many people were expecting earnings to decline very hard. Now, going forward, for now, looking at the data coming out, we have some mortgage data and also crude oil data with the Fed speaker tomorrow around 2 o'clock p.m. Make sure you're ready for all of that. Let's now break down the charts. Looking at SPY, like I said before, we had a nice cool off today. We came down, got a nice bounce. We actually closed kind of green. The question is, what's going to happen? Well, this is actually very hard to predict at this point because we are quite overextended and SPY is getting closer to retesting this trend line. If you look at other moments, right, when SPY would test this trend line or maybe just break a little below it, notice how we touch it, we'd ping pong off of it, go to the top. And this is when we were very strong. We would just briefly touch it, then bounce, touch it, then bounce. And then very recently, you could see SPY is slowing down a bit. It touches it, it bounces a little, touches it, touches it, touches it, right? It's slowing down a bit. Why? Because we're actually getting hit with stronger resistance around the 414 to 416 zone. And the question is, could we get a big break to the upside or are we going to continue to slow down? Well, in my opinion, it's going to depend heavily on the bank earnings that come out. But so far, there's no clear sign of us reversing. Yes, the rate at which we're increasing is slowing down. SPY is slowing down because a lot of the stocks that make up the price action of the S&P 500, the ones with the heaviest weight like Aapl are what are helping it drive up. But the majority of stocks are starting to slow down. Even Tesla is actually close kind of red. In my opinion, I'm actually going to break down both the bullish and bearish cases and then what I think is going to happen. For SPY, if we're really bullish, this thing could actually go all the way up to 416, maybe even higher, right? 416 to 418. If we're bearish, you're going to be watching this trend line. Do we break below this, like the 413s now? We have to hold the 413s. If it breaks below them, the 412s come, we have to quickly rebound to remain in this channel. If we break below the channel that we've been respecting for quite a while, that is not going to be a good sign. You can see this channel I drew out here is just continuing to hold it. If we break below it and we see like 412, 411, it is going to be a bearish case. It's not going to be too good, but I actually believe something different will happen. I think that tomorrow we're just going to react to the bank earnings, whether we gap up or gap down, and then we're going to see lots of choppy price action, and we're going to test this trend line. If we break below it, then we could see a bit of a pullback, but this pullback, whether it lasts another day or so, like after Wednesday, I am seeing signs of a small drop in SPY, maybe a somewhat red close for tomorrow, but there's no guarantee it's going to continue like this for Thursday and Friday because that's going to depend heavily on the tech earnings coming out, right? It's going to depend on consumer discretionary earnings, Tesla, not to mention very big companies such as the big banks and also IBM. So we have to watch these earnings very carefully. My best prediction would be once again we see quite a bit of a chop, maybe a bit of a drop, but we could bounce on Thursday or Friday depending on earnings. So it's still very mixed. The dollar was looking strong, but it actually closed kind of red. So now it's starting to chop again. If the dollar starts to decline, this would be bullish for the markets. If the dollar breaks out, this could turn a lot more bearish for the markets. For now, I'm actually seeing a possible head and shoulders developing on the hourly, but when you zoom out on the daily chart, we still technically have a very mixed signal right here. Got a nice bounce off this 100 level. It's now getting hit with this 102.25 resistance. Still very mixed, and it's going to remain pretty choppy from now. So I don't think this is going to affect us as much unless it breaks out. And we're still waiting for that to actually happen. Now, we do have a possible bullish divergence on the dollar index. Just to double check, The RSI was a lot more overbought before compared to where it is now. So I'm seeing signs of the dollar breaking out soon, which means the market will likely see downside in the future. And this is the weekly chart, so it may take a couple of weeks, but in the next few weeks, there's likely going to be downside for the market anyways, right? I'm talking about the next few weeks, not tomorrow. This is just what the VIX tells me. The dollar index. For the VIX, it's just continuing to downtrend. It has a bullish divergence right here. You can see the RSI has been technically uptrending. We're not at the low levels we were at previously, but the price of the VIX on the weekly is continuing to just drop and drop. This tells me we're likely going to see a bounce soon, but I don't know if we're going to drop more and then bounce or if we just try to bounce from here. Either way, a bounce is coming on the weekly chart of the VIX. My best guess would be within a couple of weeks, and that's going to mark the top for the stock market very soon. The market is going to cause the VIX to bounce very soon once implied volatility picks up again. On the 1 hour time frame, the VIX once again is just continuing to downtrend. It's just going lower and lower and lower. No clear sign of a bounce yet. If it fails at 16.5, it could even hit 16 flats. That's going to be the next very important level. And then 14.8 followed by like 15.5 are going to be the next levels. We'll see if 16 holds. It looks like it should bounce. It's very oversold. It should try to get a bounce, which is why I am anticipating a bit of a drop tomorrow in the stock market. But then again, it's going to also depend on what Tesla and other companies give us. Now, Amazon holding up okay. If it breaks below 101.57, the 50 EMA, we're going to likely retest 100 flat. If it fails at 100, it's going to fill this gap down here. Now, there's no guarantee that happens, once again, depending on earnings. If we could bounce off this support, 102, if it bounces off 102, it does have the potential to try to retest 104. So it really depends on how things go tomorrow. We could even see Amazon try to outperform the market in the morning, get to 104, then decline and just trade sideways. We'll see how that goes, especially after the earnings comes out. Overall, when you look at the chart, we are technically forming a bullish divergence, I believe. I'll have to double check this. We are technically doing that because of the fact that we did make a higher low on Amazon, but the RSI is making lower lows, so there is technically a divergence forming. It does not mean it has to just explode, but it could get a small bounce for the short term. Maybe by Friday we see 104 again. Nvda broke out, and that was actually kind of unexpected. Very crazy, guys. The market is just insane. When you look at this thing was forming, right? This head and shoulders. And I believe that whoever was behind this, they knew that we were suspecting this. They knew people were seeing a head and shoulders and starting to short really hard. So what did they do? They smacked this thing up against the technical indicators, against all the signals on Nvidia, and this thing actually broke above the high it made previously. But it gapped up in doing so, and we have a gap below. So I do think this thing might downtrend a bit to fill this gap and then try to bounce after that. But for now, we'll have to wait and see how this actually continues. Finally, I'm just going to talk about Aapl and then try to end the video very quickly. Aapl is still holding up nicely. There's no true sign of it actually breaking down just yet. If it breaks below 163.5 is going to be a very important support. Watch this gap around 160. If we're bullish, it could get to 168. In my previous video, I predicted Aapl would try to push up more. That is what happened, and that's why SPY and the QQQ held up. In my opinion, we could get a bit of a slowdown here since resistance is getting stronger. We might see Aapl cool off a little bit to fill this gap around 165, and then it could bounce a little bit afterwards depending on earnings for many other companies. But until then, I mean, that's what I'm essentially seeing. Netflix is kind of red right now in the after hours. So you have to wait for earnings and the reaction to it. For now, just be very patient on Netflix and we'll see what develops. 10-year treasury yield starting to cool off a bit. Are we about to come down to fill this gap? If that's the case, that's going to be bullish for the markets. If this thing holds these levels, if it holds above the hourly 200 EMA and it keeps going, that's going to become bearish. So we'll have to just wait and see what this does. It is a little bit overbought, so it is due for a bit of a pullback. That could turn bullish for the markets temporarily. Maybe later on during the week, the market holds up. I don't know for sure, though. It's going to depend on earnings. But until then, guys, expect more chop in the market, maybe a bit of a pullback tomorrow, a slight pullback, followed by whether or not we hold these levels, we could try to bounce later on. I'm not seeing this like small pullback being like a crash as of right now, but I am seeing some signs of weakness, seeing how oversold the VIX is and why we need to see a bit of a bounce in the VIX temporarily, right? Temporarily, we might see a bounce in the VIX. We might see the market pull back a little bit tomorrow based off this trend. All right. So, anyways, just because I'm saying there could be a pullback, I'm not saying the market's crashing yet. We could see a later continuation of the trend if it holds up tomorrow. If it doesn't like tank too hard, we could see later on the trend continue. And if that's the case, then the real bigger pullback I'm talking about, the big pullback, is going to come later on. We could get a small pullback tomorrow, but that's not the big pullback I'm referring to, or at least I believe that's not going to be the one. So the bigger pullback, if you want to call it the crash, I mean, that has very different words and meaning. That could come later on. That's what I'm trying to say. The bigger drop will likely come later on, but a small pullback could come tomorrow. So make sure you're ready for the big difference between those and you're prepared for tomorrow. The last thing is I have some merch for you guys. If you want to buy a hoodie or sticker or shirt that says "To the Moon" or custom merch by me, you have the option down below, either above or below the comment section, depending on where you're watching this. All right, guys. Thank you all for listening. Remain calm, cool, and collected, and I'll see you guys in the next one. The market to the moon because the long term is still very bright, and peace out.